Would you like to accelerate your career and reach your full potential in just minutes a day? Welcome to the LEADx Show with New York Times best-selling author and Inc. 500 entrepreneur, Kevin Kruse.
Hello, everyone. Kevin Kruse here. Welcome to the LEADx Leadership Show, where we are helping you to stand out and to get ahead, to be viewed as a high potential at work. They call those hypos. We help you to become the boss everyone fights to work for. On today's show, it's awesome. It's a guest who might only be the second or third person we've had on a second time. He's that good. He's got a new book out. We talk about a three-part framework for great communication, the one thing you have to do at every job interview, and a lot more. First, our quote of the day comes from Sheryl Sandberg from her book, Lean In. I learned that effective communication starts with the understanding that there is my point of view, my truth, and someone else's point of view, his truth. Rarely is there one absolute truth. So people who believe that they speak the truth are very silencing of others. And before I introduce our guest, don't forget that if you want to learn how to give effective feedback using the BIG methodology, and this is what turned me personally from a conflict-avoiding loser boss who people didn't want to work for into a great place to work award-winning boss, you can learn this BIG methodology at leadx.org and sign up for the free trial to the LEADx Academy. Our guest today is a best-selling author, executive coach, co-founder and COO of Pinnacle Performance Company. He's coached some of the world's top executives on their communication skills. We had him on before to talk about his book, The Pin Drop Principle, and now his new book is The Bullseye Principle, Mastering Intention-Based Communication to Collaborate, Execute, and Succeed. Our guest is G. Riley Mills. Gary, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here as always.
I think, Gary, you might be only the second, maybe the third person that I've had as a repeat guest in over 250 guests. So I hope you feel special about that.
I do. I'm very honored. What a way to kick off my Friday.
Yeah. Now, it was, I think, almost a year ago when I had you on, we were chatting about the pin drop principle, and right. We've kept in touch since then. And I'm excited. I mentioned in your intro the new book, again, The Bullseye Principle, Mastering Intention-Based Communication to Collaborate, Execute, and Succeed. But before we talk about the book, my new first question I always ask people is, give us some help for our young first-time managers. What leadership advice would you give to a first-time manager?
Ooh, I love the question. So here's very simply the information I would give to a first-time manager, a young leader, or a seasoned leader, a seasoned manager. You got to communicate effectively, right? Wall Street Journal, we talk about it in the Bullseye Principle, came out with a study recently. They asked 900 senior leaders and executives, what's the most important thing about success for your folks or your team? They said communication. 92% said communication and collaboration is just as important or more important than the technical skills. So I would say you got to communicate effectively to your people.
Love that. And literally 10 minutes before we went on the air, I think I was surfing, social media feed or something, and I stumbled on this article that said scientific analysis of what people are most interested in from all those TED and TEDx talks. And the number one thing was communication. So that category more than anything. So again, Gary, new book, The Bullseye Principle. What's the big idea? Why'd you want to write another book?
So Pin Drop Principle came out about 5 years ago. And you know how challenging it is to write a book. It's tough. It takes a couple years out of your life. And when we finished that book, I said, okay, I'm never doing that again.
I say that after every book.
Yeah, it was intense. It was exciting, but I said everything I needed to say in that book. We're done with it. And so just go read that book. And over the last 5 years, though, my co-founder, co-author, David Lewis, and I, we've been traveling around the world doing coaching and training for our company, Pinnacle Performance. And we noticed the way people run meetings, the way people create visual aids, the way they collaborate, the way they cooperate, the way they communicate, everything is starting to evolve and change because time is difficult and There's people all over the world. You got a team in India, you got a team over here. And we noticed things changing. And then, of course, Trump came in, and that changed the way people communicate and take in information and deal with each other. And so we felt it was time. It was time again to revisit some of these concepts and ideas that we touched upon in the Pinnacle Principle. And that's where the Bullseye Principle came about. In the front of the Bullseye Principle, there's a quote that frames up the whole book. That is, when the archer misses the mark, failure to hit the bullseye is never the fault of the target. To improve your aim, improve yourself. So the archer doesn't blame the target if they miss the bullseye. Same thing with all of us as leaders and communicators. It's your job to hit the bullseye with that audience, whether it's running a meeting, delivering a presentation, pitching your new book. You've got to hit the bullseye with that audience so they feel the way you want them to feel and do what you want them to do. So that's what this book is about. It's 10 different chapters. If you want to succeed in your role, in your industry, at your company, here's the 10 areas you have to communicate effectively in. And we talk you through why each one's important, whether it's interviewing for a job, running a great meeting, defining your personal brand, building relationships, being able to inspire other people. We take you through it in each chapter. And then at the end, there's what we call a blueprint to bullseye, which is a template, a guide that's going to help you actually apply everything that we talked about in the actual chapter.
Wow. You said so much good stuff there. And I want to make sure that our listeners really understood the power of that quote, because it's not just a throwaway or an inspirational thing. Right. It really is important and practical. It's certainly great to, we need to be accountable. We can take ownership of our own communication success or failure. But specifically now, I'm not a young dog in this. I'm an old dog in this game. And it was probably only a couple of months ago that I had a team member and I was getting frustrated because we were having a communication problem. And even after, I teach this stuff, Gary, and yet my default reaction was, oh my gosh, this person has an issue and what's wrong with this person? And I'm having trouble with this person. And I'm putting it on them. Right. And finally, I was able to just kind of let the emotions settle down and said, okay, if this is my fault, how could it be my fault? And I started to think about it. And I thought, you know what? When I assigned that thing, I never explicitly said when the deadline was. I didn't say I needed it by the end of the day. Or when I said I needed it tomorrow, was that at 9 in the morning or 5 p.m.? It was a simple communication thing. But even after all these years, my default was what's wrong with them? They're not hearing me and giving me what I want. And as soon as I slowed down and said, let's pretend it's my fault. How could I take some ownership? I saw a whole bunch of ways I could do better, and things have improved as I've gotten better in my communication.
Right. And that's great leader. That's great leader communication because it shows self-awareness. It shows receptivity that, hey, I'm open to what did I do wrong? Tell me what I did wrong. The main reason people give for wanting to quit their job or leave their job, poor relationship with the boss.
That's right.
Right. But most studies show it's not the workload. It's not how much money they get paid. It's I can't deal with her anymore. Or I can't work for him. I'm out of here. Another study we talk about in Bullseye, 71% of people feel their bosses don't communicate effectively to them. That's a huge number.
Very huge number.
So for all of us, like you, like me, who have people who report to us, we're the manager, we're the director, we're the boss. How much of that 71% do we fall into that sometimes?
Right.
And how can we improve that? 65% of people want more feedback. Right? That's a study that we talk about in the book too. 65%, they want, tell me what I'm doing wrong, what I can do better. They're not getting the feedback that they need. Younger, if you work with millennials, the younger workforce now, they want more feedback.
Right.
In fact, they want to give you feedback. Right?
They want it in both directions.
They want it in both directions. I don't care that you've been the master of this for the last 25 years. I'm going to give you feedback on what I think you can do better.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you also, sort of walked through a lot of the topics in the book. And again, I wanted to really emphasize that with our listeners too, because unlike other communication books out there that are solid on theory, so you get some theory, you've got your theory, you've got your model, but then, you show how to apply it in so many areas. You've got a chapter about, how to define your personal brand, how to land the job, communicating like a leader, motivating others, building relationships, handling these difficult conversations, how to run meetings, make a sale. So I just want to stress to the leaders, like, this is very action oriented and ends in that blueprint. And in this short format podcast, we can't go through all of that material, but I want to touch on a couple. You mentioned the feedback one, and I love that topic because as a young leader, I just basically avoided giving feedback. I was so non-confrontational. I didn't know how to do it. No one told me how to do it. It's still not something that's fun for me, but I do it better now. And I think it's such an important topic. So give me some advice on that topic.
Yeah. So in the book, we do both. Here's how to give feedback effectively, but also there's a piece in there, how to receive feedback effectively, because a lot of people aren't very good at receiving feedback. The walls go up, the dukes come out, and they get very defensive being criticized because our job is on the line. We take it personally, ego, all of those things. I think when giving feedback, another study in the book, Brigham Young did a study, and they found that people like you to get to the point. I screwed up and you're my boss. You're calling me in to tell me I screwed up and the consequences. Don't fudge around. Don't beat around the bush. Don't sugarcoat it. Just get to it. We don't like a lot of padding at the beginning is what that study found. So I think state it clearly and absolutely. It's a fact, right? It's not up for negotiation. This happened and it shouldn't have. And so now we're going to fix it. Keep it professional, not personal. Stay to the topic at hand. This is not the time to also say, and you screwed that up last week too, by the way. So keep it right to the topic. Make sure you're offering support. Make sure you're offering an action plan for them after this meeting. Let's talk again once you've had time to let it sink in and absorb what we've talked about. And also, as we talk about through the entire book, preparation is key. So before this meeting, I'm going to think about, how is Kevin going to respond when I tell him he screwed this up? He made a mistake. He didn't follow this procedure. And what questions might he come back at me with? I have to have the answers ready for those so I'm not caught off guard, because in fairness, I want to have you be able to ask me questions about what I've just talked to you about.
Preparation is key. Can't wing it. And people are going to think I'm making this story up, Gary, but like when I was at my worst, young and dumb, I was in my 20s. I had a salesperson reporting to me, and over 6 months, I mean, he just wasn't working out, missing his numbers. I was working with him. And finally, and I was so non-confrontational. I didn't know how to do this. And I said, all right, this is the day I got to tell him, like, he's got to hit this number this month or we got to let him go. He comes in, and of course, I think, like, to soften the blow, to make it easier, I start beating around the bush. Hey, how do you think things have been going lately? Do you think things have gotten better since last month? I mean, where do you think you stand? What do you think your numbers will be? I start meandering around he thinks we're just having a conversation about his numbers. He starts telling me about, and you talk to any salesperson, even on the day you're going to fire him, and it's like, oh, I got all these leads and this is 80% going to close. Like, none of them say, yeah, you're right, I'm horrible at this job.
Right.
By the time it has turned into like a 45-minute conversation, I think he walked out of my office thinking he was going to get a bonus if he hit his numbers at the end of the month. Somehow, instead of him walking out knowing that he was going to be fired, it became such a meandering conversation. I think he felt good about it, that he was going to get a bonus if he hit these numbers, not I'm going to be fired if I don't hit these numbers.
Right.
I totally screwed it up. And if I could just started by getting to the point and then talking about the issue, if he wanted to talk about it, it would have gone so much better.
True. One of the things we talk about in our training and our methodology is the idea of having an objective. What's my objective? What do I want at the end of this communication? And then what's my intention, a one-word verb that's going to activate my delivery and my body language, my voice, my word choices, that's going to make me accomplish that objective. So I want to what my audience so they do what, right? So if I want this person to improve, I've got to either reprimand, inspire, challenge, persuade, motivate. Those are all going to be choices. And depending on which one I choose, it's going to affect how the emotions of this person are affected and how they behave as a result of hearing what I have to say.
And I love that because, I mean, if I think back to this very real case, the one word verb I would have chosen early on in that relationship might be motivate or inspire or something. And that verb would change when it gets to month 6 or 7 and there's no performance. But I never pause to think about that. Like, okay, what is this verb that, is my intent? What is the intent?
And just because it was clear to you, we can't assume it's clear to the other person, right?
Right.
We have to make sure it's delivered, that the arrow hits that bullseye and doesn't fly off into the woods, because we know what the arrow is. We're clear about it, but it's got to hit the bullseye.
Yeah. Now, I just gave an embarrassing story about having to let someone go, but let's go to the beginning. When we're trying to get a job, we're trying to start a job. And, there's a lot of interviewing advice, how to conduct yourself in an interview, how to nail an interview. How is your recommendations different? What do you suggest we do when we're looking for that job?
So that formula of I want to blank my audience so they do what? Putting intention in the first slot, objective in the second. Same thing with an interview, right? You're going to start by, what do I want? Well, I want this job, right? I want them to see me as the person they have to hire. They wouldn't want to lose me. Now I'm going to go back and go, what intentions am I going to choose to make them feel a certain way so that they hire me for the job, right? So I may want to excite them. I may want to entice them. Hey, here's something interesting you maybe didn't know about me. I'm going to slip that in. I may want to motivate them to ask me more questions. I may inspire them with something I've done in the past. All of those intentions are going to be great. But when you think about it, people who are hiring managers, who are trying to find the right person for the right job, they want you to be the one, right? That's a hard process. So they want you to come in and nail it. So preparation is key. That's one of the things in the book, in Land the Job, we take you through. Here's all the information you should have ready to go for this interview. So that's the first thing. I'll tell you the one thing that I will never hire a candidate for Pinnacle if this happens. So I sit down. It's between maybe a couple candidates for the job. They all have the qualifications are great. I sit down for my first face-to-face with them. And I go through everything. I give them all the information. And at the end, I always end with, do you have any questions for me? At that point, if they don't have any questions for me, I will generally not hire them, because it tells me a couple things. Number one, it tells me you didn't do a lot of research into what we do, because you should have some questions. And number two, I want to see some curiosity. I want to see some passion. I want to see some interest. Hey, anything, right? Anything that you can ask about the company. Hey, how did you start this, right? What's the biggest challenge that you see for your industry going forward? Where do you position yourself in the industry? Where do you see the company in 5 years? What's your personal challenge right now with what's going on? How is technology affecting you? How long did it take you to write that book? How'd you come up with the idea for your new book? All those are great. They show curiosity. I'm always looking for that.
Yeah, this is, and look how many things you could just rattle off. I'm with you on that. Like it's at the very least, ask questions that show that you did some homework. You went on their website, you did some research, you Googled them, whatever it is. You checked out their profile on LinkedIn, and you're asking just even to send that signal that you put a little effort in, right?
Exactly.
Last summer, I've got 3 kids. My oldest daughter, Amanda, she was interviewing for internships, during the summer. She'd never gone out interviewing before. And I asked her, like, do you want some advice from Dad? Do you want to role play? She's like, leave me alone, Dad. I got this, one of those things. So then her very first interview, she's trying to land at a marketing agency nearby. And I'm like, how did it go? And she says, it kind of went weird. And I said, why is that? And she says, well, they asked me a bunch of questions and I answered them. I think that part went fine. But then they asked, do you have any questions for us? And I thought that was strange. And I didn't have any questions for them. And my head almost exploded because, of course, to us, now she's 17 years old, 18 years old. I'm like, Amanda, okay, you've got to be ready with questions. She's like, well, what do you ask them about? And I just went through, as you said, like, here's how you have to do it shows you didn't do the research. Here's the things you can ask about. And I think that is, like, for a lot of people, where you can differentiate yourself. Yeah.
And in the book, we give you the questions, by the way. In the book, we give you.
There you go.
We give you the questions so you don't have to try to think of what to ask. We go, pick one of these.
And that's an area that they can really set themselves apart from others who have memorized the model response to tell me your weakness or whatever.
Also, I love the idea of what's the one thing you're really passionate about? Find a way to somehow get that in. Yeah. It's not that hard, right? Yeah. Hey, you just climbed Mount Everest, or you just climbed the tallest peaks in Europe, or you just finished your first marathon. Find a place to slip that in, because it tells us who you are. It tells us something about you, and it's great.
I love it.
Set you apart.
So let me ask a final question, Gary, from any part of your book. Like, again, you cover so many areas. I like, if you remember from a year ago, I like to end on a challenge our listeners to get a little bit better. What's something give us some advice, something that we can do today?
Great. So here's what I'll give you. I'll give you the gold right here. Number one, you got to have an objective, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a meeting, a performance review. You've got to have something you want as a result of that communication taking place. And a lot of times people don't. Recent study came out, 46% of people leave meetings not knowing what to do with that information. That's a horrible meeting, because meetings are about creating, in the book, what we call meeting assets. Decisions being made, consensus being come to, action items being developed. You got to develop meeting assets. Have a goal, and then choose an intention that's going to help you achieve that goal. I want to inspire. I want to motivate. I want to challenge. I want to reprimand. I want to reassure. And then let your body language communicate that. Your voice, gestures, body language, word choices communicate that intention. So there's a very quick 3-step process for influential communication that we call the Pinnacle Method. It's what the book is about. Step number 1, you have to analyze your audience. And in the book, of course, we show you how to do that. But who are they? What do they know? What do they not know? You got to start there. Second, you got to understand how you want them to feel and what you want them to do as a result of hearing your meeting, seeing your presentation, or attending your webinar. And then the third step, once you understand what you want from them and how you want them to feel, you're going to modify delivery. Like a professional actor, your voice, your gestures, your body language, your preparation, all has to be congruent and aligned so that there's clarity of message. So that arrow, that is your message, hits the bullseye every single time.
Love it. So listeners, just think about the next meeting you're going into, that you've called for, the next presentation to your boss, whatever it is. Walk through this process and prepare and be intentional. Gary, what's the best way for our listeners to find out more about you, your work, and of course, your new book?
Go to pinper.com. That's the Pinnacle Performance Company. That's our global communication skills training firm. We train in almost 50 countries and 6 languages around the world. Pinper.com, PINPER.com. If you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. You can reach me there. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can get Bullseye on Amazon or wherever great books are sold.
That's perfect. We'll obviously put those links in the show notes. Gary, thanks again for coming on to the LEADx show.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
LEADx Nation, if you like this podcast, I hope you leave a rating or a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen. I also hope you'll go to leadx.org, O-R-G, sign up for the 3-day free trial of the LEADx Academy. It's the most affordable and effective online learning, downloadable tools, webinar archive, and executive book summaries for managers, leaders, and those who want to get ahead. It's the best stuff you'll ever see. Remember, leadership is influence. You are always leading. How will you lead today?